Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Lunch and Learn today. I'm Tony Ross, the Director of Provalis Research. Before I introduce our next presenter, if there are people in the audience today who would like to present their work through our Lunch and Learn series and have an instructive way to use our software, please contact us through the contact section of our website. We are in the process of scheduling the next set of Lunch and Learns, and we would love to have your input. The title of today's presentation is How to Use Text Analytics to Improve and Automate Analysis of Customer Comments. Our presenter today is Jarle Hildrum from Telenor Group in Norway. Jarle is a Senior Research Fellow at Telenor, which is a global mobile telecom operator headquartered in Oslo. He holds a PhD from the University of Oslo in organization behavior and works with statistics and machine learning on HR and customer data. Jarle has been a passionate user of Provalis Text Analytics for 7 years and has applied the tools in many different areas, such as employee open text feedback, social monitoring, and customer feedback classification. At the end of the presentation, if you wish to ask questions, please send them to us through the chat feature at the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We'll take as many as possible. And now I will turn the presentation over to Jarle.
I've done that for 7 years using these tools in different ways, and it's fun to be part of this. So I will not spend too much time on the background and where I come from. You said a little bit about it, but Telenor, where I work, it's a Norwegian telecom operator. It's one of the biggest tech companies in Norway, and we got 182 million mobile subscribers in Europe and East Asia. And we are about 18,000 employees. So we operate in Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Malaysia, Thailand, Myanmar, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And most of actually about half the revenues, they come from the Nordics, but although most of the customers are in Asia, that has to do with how we price our services and so on. But we do have a lot of customers, and for us, it's quite important to understand what they're saying to us, how they're experiencing our products and our customer service, so that we can improve ourselves. And when you have customers, so many of them spread across so different locations, there is a separate language for all of these countries. It gets a bit complicated to get a good overview. So that's a little bit of the background of what I'll talk about, is kind of how do you really get to listen to what your customers are saying when you have this type of setting. So one of the tools that we're using, the main tool actually to gather customer feedback, is a customer satisfaction survey that goes out whenever somebody has been in contact with us. They get an SMS on their phone, or they get a mail or something else on digital means, and then they will write about the experience in text. And typically that information goes, if it's a customer call interaction, that information goes to the customer call agent or somebody who's really close to the customer, so they kind of get the immediate feedback on the discussion they had with the customer or whatever. But very rarely are we able to aggregate all of this customer feedback up to a level where we can look at patterns of how the customers are kind of experiencing the whole company. And that's a little bit of what I like to work with. So for this presentation, I got 2 cases. The first one has to do with automating analysis of all this customer feedback, basically written customer comments coming in by way of SMS, email, or social media. So how to automate that. And then the second case that I'll look into is how to do better customer feedback analysis using text mining also. So those 2 things, that's the target for the day. All right. So here's the problem. On the left-hand side here, you see Jimmy. He's a customer analyst, works customer service in our Norwegian operation. He's a good friend of mine. And he actually works with all this feedback, all these messages that we get from our Norwegian customers. What he's doing is actually he manually categorizes this feedback into different categories because his manager wants to know every month how much of the feedback has to do with, let's say, policy, the policies that we have with asking for ID or something from the customers, how much has to do with how nice the customer agent was, how much has to do with different type of products, and so on. So the managers, they want the categorization of this feedback so they can kind of look at how this is trending month by month. So what are the customers what are the concerns now, what should we act on, and so on. So that's his job. So he actually sits there and he manually categorizes all these messages. And then what he says is that, this is so costly. I sit here and spend hours and hours on this. It's boring. It really drains my energy to do this. And I make mistakes all the time. So he really doesn't like it. He wants to do other things than that. Than sitting and spending his time on this. There are so many other things he can do. So that's the problem. And then the solution is to build a machine learning model using WordStat, and then use this to automate all the coding that he's doing, and even automate the analysis so that he doesn't have to do it at all, and then free up his time, reduce error, and make him more happy. Actually, for me, the most important thing here is really to also help him, I think, because I think that if we do things that we think is enriching in our jobs, then we can also be better, help our customers better. So you see here, I'm sure you know, but there is a module in WordStat where you can use machine learning to automatically classify different types of text. So that's what we're going to look at. So there always has to be a business case for me to do anything, almost. So here's the business case. So in Telenor Norway, so the Norwegian unit, we got 2 people who do this manual analysis, and they spend about 480 hours a year doing this manual work. And they're paid about $50 per hour. And then if you multiply that by 50, 480 by 50, and then we have 9 units, probably they have about the same effort. Then we're at $216,000. But if we automate this, then we buy a license for the stiff price of 8,300 almost, and then we have a little bit of training. Probably we need about 30 hours to train somebody to do, or some of these analysts to do this. Probably some retraining of the models also. I haven't put it in, but little less than 10,000. So it's a pretty good business case to do this. So just a couple of words on the data before I move on. So I just said that we have this customer survey. 80% of the customers who call us on the customer service, they get this SMS. So is there anything else you would like to add other than just scoring us with a number? And then about 15% of the customers, they leave a response, and then 50% of those write something. So it's about 7.5% of everybody that calls that leaves a written comment. And we got hundreds of thousands of these comments lying in our systems. Right. So when you build this machine learning model, there's a logic to that. I actually took this visual from Norma, who gave a webinar on classification some time back, and he had these pictures. I just took a caption of it. So it's quite simple actually. What we do is that we take pre-classified text. So in the case of Jimmy, we'll take all of the messages that he has already classified. We take those as training data, and then we use those to create some classification rules so that you create an algorithm that can distinguish these different messages from one another based on what characteristics they have. And when you create that algorithm, then you can use that in the second step to classify new messages. and then automate the process. So that's kind of very simply what it is. So here's the training data. So what we did was that what's most interesting is actually the negative feedback. So we took a little more than 5,000 of these comments, but we took the most negative ones because there's most of the interesting information is there. So we only actually use that. We create a model that we can use on the negative feedback. And then we started by just 4 categories. So that's customer agent. So what is the customer? Is the message about what the customer agent did? It's like, was it a cheeky person or a very nice person or helpful, so on? Is it about the customer service removed from the person, but more about the whole experience of getting service from us? Is it about a particular product, or is it about the policies that we have? The policies for, when we send the invoice, when we ask for identification, things like that, the rules of the game that we have. So the job is then to use this data to create a model that can distinguish or classify new messages based on from these categories here. And now, I don't know if you have a coffee, but if you do, you should take a big sip of the coffee, because this is my attempt to try to understand, to explain what's going on when we build a model. So I'm not going to give you click by click, let's say, explanation of how you should use WordStat for this purpose. I think that's the job of WordStat. But I'll try to explain how this model is created. So let's try this. If we start in the upper left corner, well, number 1, you see the data that I just talked about. So that's about 5,000 pre-coded messages, pre-coded according to those 4 categories. So the first step that we make is to balance the data, because we want to have an equal amount of messages for each category. Because let's say you had 5,000 of these pre-classified messages, and 4,950 of those were about the customer agent. Then the model will be great at predicting what category, putting the message into the customer agent box, but it will really be bad at categorizing for the other categories because it didn't have enough training data. So that we reduce the data set then, and we have an equal amount of training cases for each of these categories. So that's the first thing. And then we start using the system. We're at number 3. So then we have opened WordStat, and the process that goes on there is called the feature selection. That's where we start, and that's where we build this algorithm where WordStat is then finding the words that are best at distinguishing between these different categories based on the data. So for instance, here you'd see, actually it's Norwegian, but it says waiting time and broken and password and stuff like that. That's general things about customer service. So that those would be quite good at kind of distinguishing out the category customer service. So it finds these features that are good at distinguishing the 4 categories. That's what the system does. And then you get the model. And basically there's a lot of well, you're using different types of algorithms. There's actually 2. So k-nearest neighbor and Bayes net. That's available in WordStat, and a lot of possibility to try to tweak these models using the system. It's all automated. So on the 0.5 there, that's actually the output from the system when you are running different types of configurations of well, let's say settings in this system. So you can run a lot of experiments using different types of configurations of settings in order to find the model that's best at distinguishing these categories correctly. So that's the way it is. So we create a model, and then the model is tested by this data, and then we find the one that works best. And then at step 6, then we get an auto classifier. So that would be the classifier or the algorithm or the small snippet of software that helps us classify new data. So we apply that to new data, and then we get, so we can put data in there that's not classified, and it will classify it for us, and then we can just start analyzing instead of doing all this manual work. And of course, the customers, they will change their minds. We will have new products, things happen. So if you create a model like this on day one, then you probably have to change, you have to update it at some point because things happen. So you need a kind of a retraining of this model on a regular basis. All right, so again, here's the output, just the output from the model. I just showed you these graphs on the different experiments that we ran on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you see the results. And we got, for the first time we made this model, we got about 80% accuracy. So we can pick the categories correct 80% of the times. And I learned some new tricks from Norma. So I actually managed to up this a little bit. So we got a few percent better performance for some later models. But in any case, above 80 is good enough for us, because we don't need 100% for this categorization job. So it's actually good enough for us to do this. And then here's the good part for us, because if you see on the left-hand side, you got about 1,000 comments that Jimmy categorized. And he spent 16 hours doing that. And then we took the same messages and we used the WordStat with this model I just showed. And then we categorized it using WordStat. That took 0.4 seconds. And here's the output. And then we took about 15,000 SMS. That took 3 seconds or something, but from the same pool of data. And we had a customer analyst looking at the coded data and actually critically reviewing it. And for them, the quality of the classification is good enough. So for them, it actually works. So that this actually then replaces or makes it possible for them to spend their time doing other things than manually coding and categorizing this stuff. So what you get out of the classification then when you run this model on new data is, it looks like this. So you got all the different messages there, and then you got the predicted class, and then you got some scores on how sure the model is that this is indeed the right categorization. And then this can be exported. And then what do you do when you export it? That's, of course, an interesting question as well. So when we have classified the data, we use it for different things. So let me just talk a little bit about what we use it for. Because this data in itself is not so valuable. It's valuable in the sense that we can kind of see what type of feedback we are getting from the customers, week by week, day by day, month by month. So what's the volume of the feedback on policy versus the feedback on customer service, things like that. But it really becomes valuable when we link it to other data, because we can link this data, for instance, to data on how much time it takes to handle the customers in the calls that resulted in this feedback, right? So, because for all this feedback, there has been a customer call in advance, and that customer call has taken a certain amount of time, meaning money. So we can actually check. So if we know that a given amount of that feedback is linked to a certain topic, we can also estimate how much money it costs us actually to fix problems in different categories, and that makes it possible to make good decisions. So just one example. So here we estimated the time that it takes for us in a given period to solve problems in different areas. So we found that calls about products, price, and process consumes about half the time that we spend on all these customer calls. And we want to reduce the volume. So then getting into this makes it possible for us to direct the attention to the right actions on trying to get the call volume down. And the reason for customers to call, we want to bring that down in order to reduce the cost and to make the customers more happy. And of course, the next step is that you can, if you know how much time your actually spending on each of these topics, then you can also estimate how much money you're spending, which becomes an even better argument when you're going to approach some managers and say, look, maybe we should do something in this area. Okay, so those are two ways applications. The third one is that, of course, you can start. I mean, if you can do this, you can analyze much more data. So you don't have to do it every month anymore. You can do it more often because now you can analyze all the data. It doesn't take any time. So what you see here is on the horizontal, you see those are months during 2018 and 19. And then on the vertical, you see just the amount of comments. So just a count, raw count. We could have had not the count of comments. Sorry, it's the count of it's the count of comments. That's right. So it's the count of comments in different categories like this. So you can kind of look at the relative amount of comments in different categories and how they are trending from month to month. And we could have done this week by week as well. You have enough data, do it day by day. And that means that if you do that, you can start looking at anomalies. So if there's something happening, let's say there's something wrong with identification system that we're using for people to pay, certain bills, that should crop up pretty fast if you look at the data like this, you'll be able to spot those kind of things faster. And then WordStat also has this anomaly detection, I will call it, functionality where you can check, words that are coming up unusually often in a data set. And you can also use this for this purpose. You can also start to kind of dig deeper and look into what particular words are kind of unusually frequent for a certain time period. So this is we're starting to create tools that enables us to monitor the customer data in a much better way than before. Okay, so that's it. But that's the first case that I have, and I think that we kind of just started in a way for this one. We're not finished because it's not, of course, not fully automatic. Because to make it fully automatic, we need to connect this model that we created in WordStat, or connect WordStat to Qualtrics, which is our survey vendor, where the data is continuously coming in. So we need to connect to that API. That's possible to do. And we also need a web interface with the analytics, so that the analytics is also coming out automatically. And then we need a model retraining routine. So we know that we're retraining the model frequent enough, so we're actually capturing what's in the data. We cannot expect that the model will be useful forever when the world is changing. So those things we need to do. And actually the main roadblock here is privacy, because we need to make sure that we are not violating the privacy rights of our customers. So it's not easy to just build a system like this. It has to be really well built, and that's really where we are. So that's the first case. I have a very small case, another case, and then I will open for questions. So the second case is, how can we improve the analysis of customer comments using WordStat? So I talked a little bit about it, of course. As you saw, we can use this anomaly detection type of approach. That's improving for our sake, at least in our context, it is. But there's another way of doing it, and I'm sure you are probably familiar with the dictionary functionality in WordStat, I guess all of you. So what we have been doing is to build up a dictionary bottom up. So we try to capture as much of the information that is in all of these customer messages as possible. So this is basically about then putting synonyms into categories and creating categories that are meaningful for us. And then it's a very large dictionary that we're still working on, but I just wanted to draw your attention to just one way that we're using it, super simple. And that is that we are collecting all the negative words that customers are saying. And customers are really great at negative words. I mean, I learned so many new swear words when I look at this data. It's incredible. And of course, you have all the slang, and then you have all the misspellings and so on. But we're able to build a very big, kind of a very big dictionary, or a very big category of all negative words imaginable. So what we do with that is that we, of course, do something simple, like we can take the customer feedback, the messages that I just talked about, and each message has a score associated with it. So it could be from 3 to 5. That's the left-hand side. That's the people who are just neutral, to the service, or they're satisfied. And then you see that that's, if you look at just the positive and the negative words and you kind of summarize it month by month, you'd see that, it's just overly, it's more positive than negative. And then if you do it on the dissatisfied customers, it's the opposite way. So that's where all the negative feedback is. That doesn't help us much, but if we do something like this, if you see here, we got on the left hand, let's say on the vertical axis, we got all our call centers in Telenor Norway. So these are call centers. And then we have just split the data on call centers. So for call center A, so that first line there, that's all the data that comes from call center A. And then we categorized, we actually did the word count based on the dictionary to check what types of negative words are there. And these are only negative words. And then you see that there on the right-hand side, these are the categories of like moderately negative, that's strongly negative. And then we have specifics like fraud and deceit, rude and arrogant, misinformation, misunderstanding, incompetence, rigidness, slowness, mess, and chaos. And what's interesting here is to see kind of what's special for all of these call centers, and is there also a change over time? For instance, if you look at call center F, they have much more of the rude and arrogant than the other call centers, and it hasn't always been like that, because that kind of it's been growing a little bit. So that's interesting, and that makes it possible to ask a question. So what's the reason? So actually, I asked the question, and it turns out that this call center is in a place called Harstad, which is very far north in Norway. And actually, the further north you get, if you split this data on geography, then there are more swear words the further north you get. I don't know if the same in Canada, but it's like that in Norway. So it's a little bit about the dialect and the lingo, but it's also something about, what's going on with that call center. And you can start to try to improve also how they're running these call centers. Okay, so that's it for me. Thanks for your attention, and looking forward to any comments.
Okay, thank you very much. That was really interesting. If you have a question, please use the chat feature, and we'll ask as many questions as you have. I have one question now, which is, which languages other than Norwegian did you analyze? And if you did, are there some languages that are more difficult than others to analyze?
Well, so far for this data, I've been analyzing Norwegian and Swedish and Danish. And the reason for that is that this is possible for me to, and English. And that the reason is that this is possible for me to do because I don't have, I need to have a partner with me if I'm going to do this, for instance, for Bangla or for Malay or for Thai, or these languages, I don't speak them. So then I would be dependent on working with other people in the company. I have done that for HR data. I've done it for all the languages, but then we need a partner who can help us build up the dictionaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, yeah. So and also I think that this is of course extremely important for building the dictionaries, because that's a little bit of an art form as well as I see it, because whatever you get out of the analysis when you use dictionaries is very much colored by how you structure those dictionaries. You can get any output you want if you just put them together in the right way, right? So, or the way you label the boxes and everything. So that's a little bit of an art form, and that has to, then I think it's super important that you're working really closely with people who know the customers and who are going to use the output in the end, because it kind of has to make sense to them. And that's why it's, you know, it's important to even if you know the language, you have to work also closely with those people on the ground. If you're doing the automatic classification, I think that's a different story, because as long as you have the training data, I mean, and the training data is good, you don't really need to know the language.
Have you analyzed Chinese any? Well, you're not in China, right? But have you analyzed any Asian languages or other languages other than the ones you mentioned, like Far East languages?
Yeah, so I worked with some collaborators in Pakistan working with Urdu, and we also worked with Thai. But then I will not be the main guy. I will just be the one who's kind of helping with the tool, and then it's not we used it on the employee data, which is something that's very different from this kind of analysis, because there are so much fewer observations and much less text.
Okay, and I think, well, I know in WordStat 9, which we're going to be releasing in the next couple of months, it will have features that it will be able to analyze Thai and Chinese and Japanese and Korean and you know, many other languages. So that's hopefully, and we hope we're beta testing that now, and we hope to be able to release that sometime in May for those out there who are listening. Okay, here's a question: how far are you up the learning curve? How far up the learning curve are you given a set of training data? Are you 50% of the way to having a good dictionary, or are you 10% of the way there?
So if we're talking about the dictionary, or are we talking, just to clarify, so are we talking about the dictionary-based analysis, or are we talking about automatic classification?
I think we're talking about the dictionary.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think that I would say that we're about 30%, because that's I think we're for the dictionary coverage. I think that we're nowhere near full. It's hard to say, but I think that I'm just relying on the dictionary coverage, and then there's so much slang and so many words that we still haven't been able to kind of categorize right. So we're not on. You know, we have a long way to go to make this really good.
Okay. Did you try to have machine learning distinguish, for example, dissatisfaction about a mobile handset from dissatisfaction about the communication quality, assuming you spot through dictionary models communication quality and dissatisfaction when a comment has got all three keywords?
Yeah, so what we did was that I mean, the training data we used to distinguish feedback about, you know, about different top kinds of feedback, you know, the content of the feedback. There we kind of only use the pre-coded messages, and they were categorized. We have two levels of categorization. So I showed the simplest one, that was 4 categories, and we have another one with 8 that gets a little bit more detail. There we did not distinguish the level of satisfaction on that, but what we did do was that, since we have a satisfaction score for every single comment, and that now we're talking hundreds of thousands of comments, we have been running models where we just created the model that's able to kind of identify negative messages, and so far it's not so useful for us, because we ask in any case if people are satisfied. But what we've been thinking about is that maybe if we do this and we create really good models, we don't have to ask people about how happy they are, but just ask for their feedback instead in text, and then we can kind of we can just extract the level of satisfaction from the text itself, and then save the customer one step of clicking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a provision for unsupervised learning, particularly topic modeling, to identify trends and emerging concerns that have not been previously categorized?
I have not had good experiences with using the unsupervised learning, to be honest. I run the topic modeling module in WordStat, and I kind of I end up with the categories that, again, I think that I can get categories out from the unsupervised learning that kind of makes sense to me. But in the end, this data or these analysis, they are consumed by the kind of the customer analytics teams, and they typically have hypotheses about what types of categories are important and what they want to look at. So it's to make it useful for them, I need to start with what they all have already defined as, the areas that they want to look into, and then it doesn't help me so much with the topic modeling. And also, I think often that the topic models are a little bit hard to interpret. So far, at least, that's been my experience. So I haven't used it so much.
Okay. Just for those of you who may not be familiar with the software, with WordStat, topic modeling is one of the features. You can do topic modeling on your corpus and clustering to do some exploratory text mining to get some sense of what the topics are that are out there. Are there any? Do we have? Oh yes, another question. Have you tried this with social media or only with call centers?
I also tried it with social media. So we downloaded all of the kind of the Twitter, everything that's said about Telenor and the different companies that we own on Twitter globally. And so we had this. I think that we used. There is a functionality for that in WordStat as well. This scraper that just extracts this feedback over time. So we did that for a while, but the experience was that the data was too thin. So there's really too little data, at least on Twitter, that we can use it. It's helpful for us. We also used it for our own social media sites. So we used it for Telenor's Facebook site and so on, because there's a lot of feedback there as well. But so far, the data is too scarce, I think, for us to get really kind of something useful out of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Norman was just asking a question about it, about LDA and MNFF. Does WordStat integrate with the service desk software and kind of analyze feedback in conjunction with the request itself?
So so if it integrates with our service desk, so that we can have a kind of an integrated process where, when the feedback comes in from the customers, you could kind of integrate it directly with the people who are in contact with customers. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah,
I believe so.
No, it doesn't yet, and that's of course something that we would really love to do. So far, or what at least the Norwegian unit has invested in SAS as a tool to analyze the customer feedback. But in my opinion, the text mining functionality of Provalis is much better than the one that's in SAS. So they have not yet been able to create anything useful, I think, actually in that area, in the text mining area, from SAS. That's my view. But then since we have this, let's say, this competing software there, it's not so easy for us to kind of bring this in. But what WordStat has been used for then is more like, it's not an ad hoc tool, but it's like, well, it's what we're using at the moment. But they are kind of hoping that SAS will work in the end. But that's why I actually wrote about the next steps, is something like, what I would like to do is not to integrate anything into the service desk, and there's lots of legacy systems and will take forever, but rather to create something more lightweight, like a web interface, where you can, and I think that the customer feedback is kind of well understood, for some purposes on the service desk level, but we want the insight aggregated to a level above that. And that's, I think, where we would like to target the further use of WordStat for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
You in your model, you get 80% fairly easily, and you know how to tweak it higher if you want to. But you say 80%. In your presentation, you said 80% is fine for you. What about the other 20% of the comments? Are these dealt with manually, or what sort of what happens to them?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a little bit of what we are doing is that we are also doing some manual coding of those, and the goal is to improve the model, of course. So, and create a new and better training data set. So it's a little bit of a work in progress. And I'm not saying that, the end point is 80%. It's just that, the point was just to say that even with that effort, we were able to get so much, usefulness out of it. But the goal is to build better training data, and it's also something about the retraining aspect here, that even if we got to 100% now, or 99, we'd still have to retrain this thing. Probably now, because we have the pandemic, that you get kind of special requests that you can't capture those with the pre-pandemic model either. So it's like, I think it's an ongoing process.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're coming up to the top of the hour. I also want to mention, and I know you use R.
Yep.
Yep. You have experience in R. I just wanted to mention that, just by the way, you can't see them, but you're getting a lot of kudos. A lot of people are saying, thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thanks.
You use R, and in the new, in WordStat 9, which again, I said, we expect to be releasing sometime in the next, a month or two, probably sometime in May, maybe in June. You'll be able to use Python and R scripts for both pre-processing and post-processing. So you'll be able to better customize WordStat for your use. I actually want to ask, how would that help you? Can you think how that would help you by being able to use R? It would make your life easier or better?
For once, I mean, I think that just, working with the data, not having to, I mean, I think if I can have everything in data frames in R and integrate it instead of using these Excel files and these things, but and also use the visualization functionalities in R, I would rather use ggplot than to use something else. And if I can integrate this with R, it would be perfect, because I use R for so many other things. And of course, there's also this programming possibility with visualization through a web interface, and the possibilities become much greater, I think. So I'm very curious about how that's going to work with this new version of WordStat.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was a great presentation. We have been recording this, so if the recording checks out, and hopefully it will, we'll be posting it on the website for people to be able to look at later. Again, I apologize, Jarle, and I apologize to everybody for a rocky start to this. Seem to have had some problem in the links for Zoom, but we got it organized eventually, and it worked. I don't know. I think my shirt is soaked through from sweating about this, but so thank you very much. And our next scheduled lunch and learn, hopefully we'll have some before, and please watch our social media and our website if we schedule some more before. But our next one is scheduled for June 15th at 12 o'clock. But Professor Božidar Vlasic on how to reveal the underlying intellectual structure of the domain with WordStat. You'll be able to register on the learning. You are able to register on the learning webinar section of the Provalis website and watch our social media. And just as a final comments, do you have any other final things to say, Jarle?
I just want to thank you all, and thank you, Tony, for setting this up. It's been a pleasure, and I'm also very happy for I'm glad for that. There's some nice somebody got something out of it. So it's fun to be here. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, and you have a nice evening, and we'll have the good rest of our day. And wherever you are, thank you very much for joining. Much appreciated. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.